Dust devils danced across the parched earth as the sun beat down on the Double Bar Ranch. This wasn't just land to Caleb, it was life itself. 60 years he'd spent on this ranch, learning its secrets, feeling its heartbeat. His calloused hands knew every inch of fence, every dip in the creek bed. Now, a shadow loomed, threatening to steal it all away. Caleb was no young buck anymore. The lines etched on his face told stories of hard work, drought, and the occasional stampede. But his eyes, though weathered, still held a spark of defiance, a refusal to be pushed around. He surveyed his cattle, their silhouettes stark against the horizon, a sense of peace settling over him. This land fed them, sheltered them, and in turn, they provided for his family. He thought of Sarah, his daughter, her spirit as untamed as the wild mustangs that roamed the hills. She'd inherited his stubbornness, his love for the ranch. And then there was the memory of his late wife, Mary, whose gentle spirit still seemed to linger in the cottonwood trees by the river. He couldn't betray their shared dreams, their sacrifices. The railroad was coming, that much was certain. Mr. Sterling, they called him, a man whose name whispered of money and power. He wanted Caleb's land, a crucial piece for his grand plan. But Caleb wasn't selling. He'd rather die standing on his own 2 feet than be bought and sold like a head of cattle. He just hoped he could protect his family from the storm that was brewing. The shadow that loomed over Caleb's ranch had a name, Mr. Thaddeus Sterling. He was a man built of steel and ambition, a railroad baron who saw the West as a giant chessboard, and towns, ranches, and lives were merely pieces to be moved. He controlled vast stretches of land, bought and sold politicians like horses, and left a trail of broken dreams in his wake. Sterling wasn't born into wealth. He clawed his way to the top, crushing anyone who dared to stand in his path. He saw opportunity where others saw hardship, potential where others saw only dust. The railroad was his empire, and he intended to expand it, no matter the cost. His methods were as varied as the terrain he conquered. Sometimes it was a friendly handshake and a generous offer. Other times it was a whisper in the right ear, a carefully placed threat, or a sudden, inexplicable misfortune befalling those who resisted. He had men who could make problems disappear or appear with equal ease. Sterling considered himself a visionary, a builder of progress. He believed he was bringing civilization to the untamed wilderness, even if it meant uprooting families and destroying livelihoods. He saw Caleb's ranch not as a home, but as an obstacle, a piece of land that stood between him and his grand design. And obstacles, Mr. Sterling had learned, were meant to be removed. He arrived in town with a smile and a promise of prosperity, but behind his eyes lurked a cold calculation, ruthless determination to get what he wanted. The offer came in the form of a crisp, official-looking letter delivered by a sharply dressed man in a bowler hat. It spoke of progress, opportunity, and a sum of money that would make Caleb and his family comfortable for generations. The numbers were impressive, enough to buy a sprawling mansion in the East, a fleet of fancy carriages, and a life of leisure. It was an offer designed to be refused. Mr. Sterling followed up the letter with a personal visit. He arrived in a gleaming, newly painted automobile, a stark contrast to Caleb's dusty pickup truck. He exuded charm, flashing a practiced smile and offering Caleb a cigar. He spoke of the railroad's benefits to the community, the jobs it would create, the prosperity it would bring. He painted a picture of a bright future, a future that included Caleb as a wealthy benefactor, enjoying the fruits of his wise decision. "Think of your daughter, Caleb," Sterling said, his voice smooth as silk. "This money could secure her future, give her opportunities she wouldn't otherwise have." He leaned closer, his smile fading slightly. Of course, progress has a way of moving forward, with or without those who stand in its path. Sometimes, those who resist regret it. The underlying threat hung heavy in the air, disguised as concern. The offer was more than just money. It was a test of Caleb's will, his loyalty, and his understanding of the power Mr. Sterling wielded. Caleb took a long drag from his own hand-rolled cigarette, the smoke curling into the vast, indifferent sky. He looked Mr. Sterling square in the eye, the lines around his own mirroring the cracked earth of his ranch. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his voice raspy but firm, "I appreciate the offer. It's generous." He paused, letting the word hang in the air, heavy with irony. "But this ranch," he continued, gesturing towards the rolling hills, "it ain't just dirt and grass. It's my blood, my sweat, my family's legacy. My grandpappy homesteaded this land, fought off rustlers, and weathered droughts that would have broken lesser men. My wife, Mary, she poured her heart and soul into this place. Her memory lives in every corner of it." He stepped closer to Sterling, his gaze unwavering. "You see that old oak tree by the creek? I carved our initials into it when we were just kids. That barn? We built it together, board by board. This ranch, it's more than money can buy. It's home." He took another drag, the embers glowing like tiny, defiant flames. "So, with all due respect, Mr. Sterling, you can take your offer and shove it. I ain't selling." He flicked the cigarette, but to the ground, grinding it out with his heel, a final, unspoken declaration. The air crackled with tension, the polite facade shattered. The battle lines were drawn. The first sign was subtle, almost easy to dismiss as an accident. A section of fence, carefully constructed and sturdy, was found cut, allowing a few head of cattle to wander onto the neighboring property. Caleb patched it up, chalking it up to wear and tear. But then the well, the ranch's primary source of water, started producing a foul-smelling, brackish liquid. It took days to clean and purify, forcing them to ration water and rely on a distant spring. Next came the poisoned feed. Several of Caleb's prize-winning horses fell ill, their sleek coats dulling, their energy sapped. The vet confirmed it, deliberate poisoning. Fear began to creep into the Double Bar Ranch, a silent, insidious presence that gnawed at their peace of mind. These weren't accidents. They were warnings, escalating acts of sabotage designed to make life unbearable, to force Caleb to reconsider his decision. They were meant to break his spirit, to make him believe that resistance was futile. Caleb knew exactly who was behind it. Mr. Sterling's veiled threat echoed in his ears with every new misfortune. He knew this was just the beginning, that worse was yet to come. He just didn't know how far Sterling was willing to go. He tightened his grip on his rifle, the cold steel a small comfort in the face of the growing storm. He wouldn't be intimidated. He would protect his land, his family, even if it meant facing death itself. Sarah, Caleb's daughter, was as much a part of the Double Bar as the weathered barn and the winding creek. With her sun-streaked hair, calloused hands, and eyes that mirrored the vastness of the prairie sky, she possessed a strength that belied her slender frame. She could ride a horse like the wind, mend a fence with unwavering determination, and shoot a rifle with deadly accuracy. She wasn't just a rancher's daughter. She was Caleb's right hand, his confidant, his rock. She'd learned everything from him, from reading the weather patterns to understanding the language of the cattle. When Mary passed, Sarah stepped up, taking on responsibilities that would have crushed a lesser person. She managed the finances, oversaw the ranch hands, and kept the home fires burning. The sabotage had ignited a fire in her as well, a fierce protectiveness of her family and her home. She refused to be intimidated. While Caleb relied on his experience and his unwavering resolve, Sarah brought a sharp intellect and a relentless determination to uncover the truth. She started keeping watch at night, patrolling the perimeter with her rifle, her senses heightened, alert to any sign of trouble. She examined the cut fences, searching for clues, anything that might identify the culprit. She knew they were up against a powerful enemy, but she refused to back down. She would fight for her family, for her land, with every ounce of strength she possessed. She was ready to meet Mr. Sterling's threats head-on. Sheriff Brody was a man caught between two worlds. He was elected to protect the town and its people, but Mr. Sterling's influence was a powerful current that ran deep. Brody had always been a fair man, respected in the community for his even-handed approach to justice. But Sterling's arrival had complicated things. Initially, Brody had been sympathetic to Caleb's plight, promising a thorough investigation into the sabotage. He even paid a visit to the double bar, offering words of reassurance and a show of support. But as the weeks passed, his visits became less frequent, his demeanor more distant. He started making excuses, citing a lack of evidence, limited resources, and the need to maintain neutrality. Sarah noticed the subtle shift. The sheriff, who once looked her in the eye with genuine concern, now averted his gaze. He seemed hesitant, uncomfortable, as if he were carrying a heavy burden. She overheard him talking to Mr. Sterling in town, their voices low and conspiratorial. She saw the glint of gold pass from Sterling's hand to Brody's during a supposed friendly handshake. It became clear Sterling had gotten to him, whether through bribery, intimidation, or a promise of future favors. The sheriff was no longer a reliable ally. He was walking a tightrope, trying to balance his conscience with the pressures of power. And Sarah feared he was about to fall on the wrong side. The law, it seemed, was for sale. Jed had been with the double bar for nearly 20 years. He was quiet, reliable, a man of few words but unwavering loyalty. He knew the ranch as well as Caleb did, understood the rhythms of the land, and could fix anything with a piece of wire and a prayer. He was practically family. That's what made it so devastating when Sarah discovered the truth. She'd been tracking footprints near the poison watering hole, following a set of distinct boot prints that didn't belong to Caleb or herself. The tracks led to a secluded spot behind the bunkhouse, a place Jed often frequented. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard, Sarah found a small pouch filled with coins, freshly minted gold coins, the kind Mr. Sterling was known to favor. And tucked inside the pouch, a crumpled piece of paper with a list of tasks. Cut fence, $5, poison well, $20, disable north windmill, $15. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Jed's. The betrayal cut deep, a sharp, agonizing pain that went beyond the physical damage to the ranch. It was the loss of trust, the shattering of a bond that had been forged over years of shared hardship and loyalty. Sarah felt a wave of anger, followed by a profound sadness. How could Jed, a man they had welcomed into their home, do something so despicable? She knew she had to tell Caleb, but she dreaded the pain it would cause him. The enemy wasn't just outside the ranch, it was within. The threat started subtly, whispers in the night, the sound of horses approaching and then veering away. Then came the notes, slipped under the door or left weighted down by stones on the porch. Sell now, while you still can. One read, the letters crudely cut from a newspaper. Accidents happen, warned another, its message chillingly concise. One night, while Sarah was on patrol, she saw riders in the distance, their faces obscured by shadows. They fired shots into the air, the bullets whizzing harmlessly overhead, but the message was clear, they were being watched. The intention wasn't to kill, not yet, but to instill fear, to wear them down, to break their resolve. Caleb tried to remain stoic, but Sarah saw the worry etched on his face, the sleepless nights taking their toll. He started carrying a rifle everywhere he went, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. He knew Sterling was trying to push him to the breaking point, to make him crack under the pressure. The most unsettling incident was the mutilated calf, found near the creek, its body bearing the unmistakable mark of a branding iron, Sterling's brand. It was a gruesome display of power, a blatant disregard for the law, and a chilling reminder of what Sterling was capable of. Sarah knew they were running out of time. They had to find a way to fight back, to expose Sterling's crimes before it was too late. The threats were no longer subtle. They were a declaration of war. Sarah confronted Jed at dawn, cornering him near the stables. She held out the pouch of coins and the list, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "What is this, Jed?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly. Jed's face paled. He looked down at the ground, avoiding her gaze. He mumbled something unintelligible, shuffling his feet in the dirt. "Tell me," Sarah insisted, her voice rising. He finally confessed, his voice barely a whisper. He'd been struggling financially, his wife was sick, and Sterling had offered him a way out, a chance to provide for his family. He knew it was wrong, he said, but he felt he had no choice. Sarah listened, her heart aching with disappointment. She understood desperation, but she couldn't condone his actions. "You betrayed us, Jed," she said, her voice filled with sorrow. "You betrayed Caleb, who treated you like family." She gave him a chance to explain to Caleb, but Jed couldn't face him. He packed his meager belongings and left the double bar before sunrise, disappearing into the vast expanse of the prairie. His departure left a void, a painful reminder of the damage Sterling's greed had inflicted. Sarah knew that while Jed was gone, the underlying problem remained. They were still vulnerable, still under attack. She needed to find a way to turn the tide, to expose Sterling and protect her family before it was too late. The fire started in the barn, a flickering orange glow against the night sky that quickly erupted into a raging inferno. The smell of smoke and burning hay filled the air, choking and acrid. The animals, trapped inside, screamed in terror. Sarah and Caleb raced towards the barn, their hearts pounding with dread. They kicked open the heavy wooden doors, flames licking at their faces, the heat almost unbearable. They managed to coax some of the horses and cattle out, but others were too frightened to move, their eyes wide with panic. Neighbors, alerted by the blaze, arrived with buckets of water and shovels, forming a human chain to battle the flames. They fought tirelessly, but the fire spread rapidly, consuming everything in its path. The barn, a symbol of their hard work and their livelihood, was reduced to ashes. Caleb watched in despair, the flames reflecting in his tear-filled eyes. He knew this wasn't just an accident. This was Sterling's final act of intimidation, a desperate attempt to force him off his land. Sarah, despite the chaos and the devastation, remained calm and focused. She knew they couldn't afford to give up. They had to find a way to rise from the ashes, to rebuild their lives and their ranch. The fire may have destroyed their barn, but it hadn't destroyed their spirit. It had only strengthened their resolve to fight back. She knew that, somehow, they would make Sterling pay. The morning after the fire dawned gray and somber, the air thick with the smell of smoke and the weight of despair. The barn was nothing but a charred skeleton, a stark reminder of their loss. But amidst the devastation, a spark of hope flickered. Neighbors, their faces grim but their spirits unbroken, arrived with tools and supplies, ready to help rebuild. They brought food, blankets, and words of encouragement, their presence a testament to the strength of community in the face of adversity. They helped Caleb and Sarah tend to the injured animals, clear the debris, and salvage what they could. Working side by side, they managed to save most of the livestock, herding them into temporary shelters and providing them with food and water. It was hard work, back-breaking labor, but it was also a healing process, a way to channel their grief and anger into something productive. Caleb, witnessing the outpouring of support, felt a surge of renewed hope. He realized he wasn't alone in this fight. He had his family, his friends, and his community standing beside him. He straightened his back, his eyes hardening with determination. Sterling may have thought he could break him, but he had only made him stronger. He looked at Sarah, her face smudged with soot, but her eyes shining with unwavering resolve. He knew that, together, they could overcome anything. They would rebuild the barn, rebuild their lives, and they would bring Sterling to justice. Despite the hardships, the constant threats, and the devastating fire, Caleb refused to be broken. He stood tall, his back straight, his gaze unwavering. He knew Sterling wanted him to give up, to sell the ranch and disappear, but he wouldn't give him the satisfaction. He walked among his neighbors, his voice strong and clear, thanking them for their help, their support, their unwavering loyalty. He spoke of his family's history, of the sacrifices they had made, of the deep connection they had to the land. He reminded them of the values they shared: hard work, honesty, and a fierce determination to protect what was rightfully theirs. His words resonated with the community, igniting a fire within them as well. They saw in Caleb a symbol of their own struggles, their own hopes, their own dreams. They knew that if Sterling could take Caleb's land, he could take theirs too. Caleb's resilience inspired not only his community, but also his daughter, Sarah. She saw in him a strength that she hadn't fully appreciated before, a quiet determination that transcended age and hardship. She knew that she had to be strong for him, to support him, to help him fight this battle to the very end. They would not let Sterling win. They would not be intimidated. They would stand their ground together. They would be an example for the town to follow. While Caleb focused on rebuilding and inspiring the community, Sarah dedicated herself to gathering evidence against Sterling. She knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to bring him down. She needed proof, solid evidence that could stand up in court, even with a corrupt sheriff in his pocket. She started by retracing Jed's steps, searching for any clues he might have left behind. She questioned the townspeople, discreetly probing for information about Sterling's activities. She spent hours poring over land records, looking for irregularities, for any indication of Sterling's underhanded dealings. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly. While examining the remnants of the burned barn, she discovered a small, metallic object, a distinctive lighter, engraved with Sterling's initials. It was partially melted, but the engraving was still visible. It was the same lighter she had seen Sterling use during his visit to the ranch. She also managed to find a witness, a disgruntled former employee of Sterling's, who was willing to testify about Sterling's illegal activities, including the sabotage of the Double Bar Ranch. The witness, fearing for his safety, agreed to cooperate only if his identity was protected. With the lighter and the witness testimony, Sarah finally had enough evidence to confront Sterling. She knew it was a risky move, but she was determined to bring him to justice, to expose his crimes, and to protect her family and her community from his tyranny. The time for waiting was over. It was time to fight back. The showdown took place in the town square, in front of the general store, a place where neighbors gathered and gossip spread. Sarah had sent word to Sterling, requesting a meeting, and he, confident in his power, had agreed. Caleb stood beside her, his presence a silent declaration of defiance. The community gathered around, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Sterling arrived in his fancy automobile, his face etched with a mixture of arrogance and annoyance. "What is this, Miss Caleb?" he demanded, his voice laced with disdain. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "This is where you pay for your crimes, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice clear and strong, carrying across the square. She presented the evidence, the lighter still bearing his initials, and then introduced the witness, a former foreman named Frank, who nervously recounted Sterling's orders to sabotage the Double Bar Ranch. Frank's voice shook, but his testimony was unwavering. Sheriff Brody, visibly uncomfortable, tried to intervene, but the crowd, emboldened by Sarah's courage and Frank's testimony, wouldn't let him. They had seen enough. They had suffered enough. They were ready to stand up for what was right. The tide had turned. Sterling's arrogance started to fade. Fear came over him. He knew he was trapped. Sheriff Brody, seeing the overwhelming support for Caleb and Sarah and realizing that his own reputation was on the line, had no choice but to act. The community, once intimidated by Sterling's power, now surrounded him, their faces grim and determined. He stepped forward, his voice hesitant but firm. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Sterling, his face contorted with rage and disbelief, tried to protest, but his words were drowned out by the jeers and shouts of the crowd. He knew he was defeated. His power, his influence, his money, all meant nothing in the face of the community's collective will. Brody placed handcuffs on Sterling, the metallic click echoing in the tense silence. As he led him away, Sterling glared at Caleb and Sarah, his eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll be back." But Caleb just smiled, a slow, confident smile that spoke of years of hard work and unwavering resolve. "No, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It's over." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a triumphant roar that filled the town square. Justice, finally, had been served. The arrest was peaceful. The town had won. With Sterling behind bars, his railroad plans began to unravel. The investors, once eager to back his ambitious project, started to withdraw their funds, fearing the negative publicity and the legal ramifications of his actions. The politicians who had once courted his favor now distanced themselves from him, eager to salvage their own reputations. His carefully constructed empire began to crumble, his reputation tarnished beyond repair. The railroad expansion, which had seemed so inevitable, was now stalled, its future uncertain. Other ranchers, inspired by Caleb's courage and Sarah's determination, refused to sell their land, further disrupting Sterling's plans. The town, once divided and intimidated, now stood united, their spirit unbroken. They had faced a powerful enemy and emerged victorious, their sense of community strengthened by the shared struggle. They had learned that even the wealthiest and most powerful man could be brought down by the collective will of ordinary people. Sterling's defeat served as a warning to others who might try to exploit and bully their way to success. It was a victory for justice, for fairness, and for the enduring power of the human spirit. The town started to prosper once more, with new businesses opening and a renewed sense of optimism filling the air. The cloud that had hung over them had finally lifted. The following spring, the Double Bar Ranch was reborn. With the help of the community, the barn was rebuilt, stronger and more resilient than before. The fences were mended, the wells were cleaned, and the livestock thrived. The ranch was a testament to the enduring power of hope and the unwavering spirit of the human heart. Caleb and Sarah worked side by side, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced adversity and emerged victorious, their love for each other and for their land deepened by the shared experience. They had learned that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found, always hope to be cherished. They honored Mary's memory, planting a new grove of cottonwood trees by the river, their leaves rustling in the wind, whispering stories of courage and resilience. They welcomed new calves into the world, their bleating a symbol of new beginnings and the continuation of their family's legacy. The Double Bar Ranch stood as a beacon of hope for the entire community, a reminder that even the most powerful forces could be overcome with determination, unity, and an unwavering belief in what is right. The land was safe. The family was whole. They could finally rest. Years passed, and the story of Caleb and Sarah became a legend, a tale told around campfires and passed down through generations. It was a story about courage, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even when faced with overwhelming odds. The Double Bar Ranch continued to thrive, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Caleb, though his hair grew whiter and his steps a little slower, remained the heart and soul of the ranch, his wisdom and his unwavering spirit guiding his family and his community. Sarah took on more responsibility, her strength and her determination serving as an inspiration to all who knew her. She continued to fight for justice, advocating for the rights of ranchers and farmers, ensuring that no one would ever again be exploited by greed and power. And so, the story of the Double Bar Ranch became more than just a tale about a rancher who refused to sell his land. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest of voices can make a difference, and that with courage, unity, and an unwavering belief in what is right, anything is possible. The world knew their name. The sun set over the Double Bar Ranch, painting the sky in hues of orange, purple, and gold. Caleb sat on the porch, watching the cattle graze peacefully in the pasture, a sense of contentment washing over him. He had faced his greatest challenge and emerged victorious, his family and his community stronger than ever before. He looked at Sarah, who sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the same peaceful sunset. She had grown into a remarkable woman, her courage and her determination inspiring all who knew her. He was proud of her, proud of the legacy they had created together. He knew that the world would always be filled with challenges, with injustices, with those who sought to exploit and bully others. But he also knew that there would always be those who were willing to stand up and fight for what is right. Those who were willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of justice and fairness. And that, he thought, was the most important lesson of all. That even in the face of overwhelming odds, even when it seemed like all hope was lost, it was always possible to make a difference. That even the smallest of voices could be heard, and that with courage, unity, and an unwavering belief in what is right, anything is possible. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, but the light of hope remained, burning bright in the hearts of Caleb and Sarah, and in the hearts of all who knew their story. The end.